Today's video was sponsored by the word recreate. Time for our last diagnostic video about how to diagnose faults with cars. This will be the third one now. We've done a couple already. If you're interested in getting up to date with those, then have a look at the previous ones. So far we've covered the type of fault that you're looking at, how to gather evidence, how to speak to the driver and gather the evidence for the misfire, how to think. It's mainly really about getting all your ducks in a line, thinking clearly and thinking straight, and not being afraid to backtrack on what you were thinking the fault might be, not being too big for your boots and doggedly pursuing what you think is a problem when you could be wrong. You know, you've got to be ready to admit that you're wrong, or ask for help, or go back on yourself and try something else, not letting your ego get in the way. So we get to the third and final part of doing effective diagnostics, and that is once you've come up with an idea, you need to formulate a way of proving it. One of the things that gets hard to figure out is intermittent misfires. So the car's driving along under normal loads and it's all fine, so it only misfires once in a while, maybe under heavy load going up a hill or when it's raining or whatever. The car comes to you in the garage and it's not misfiring. Don't just open the bonnet and go, no, it's not misfiring, it's fine, and then send it back out the door. You need to try and find ways of reproducing the misfire. So that comes down to speaking to the customer again, or the person that's driving the car, or the person that's complaining of the fault. And getting information, asking them, does it do it when you load it up, when you're going up a hill, hard acceleration? Is it random? Does it happen in the wet? If they say it's happening in the wet, then great. You get yourself a little water can, a little mister spray, like a bug gun or whatever, spray the top of the coils and the spark plugs and see if it starts misfiring. That's a great way of finding out where the misfire's being caused. If it comes in and it's dry, you can isolate each component, like the top of the coil, the top of the plugs, HT leads, and find out exactly which part is shorting out by spraying it with a little mister bug gun. So lots of different ways of proving your idea, but you have to formulate these ways and not just assume that you're right and then doggedly chase that idea. The final stage of your diagnostics is that you are going to come up with an idea of what's wrong with the car, and then you're going to try and prove it. That is the hardest part. If you've got a misfire, then you need to try and recreate it and prove what's causing the fault. If it's a rattle, you sometimes drive cars with several rattles. Again, you need to converse with the driver and say, which rattle is it? Which one do you want to get fixed? Sometimes they got lots of rattles, and sometimes you can hear a rattle that they're not worried about, but the one that you can hear is actually quite a serious one and needs to be addressed. So that's another thing too. It's all about communication, speaking to the driver, and also communicating with yourself properly and figuring out how to run a good way of analysing these faults. So gathering evidence, proving your fault, and then recreating the fault. So recreating the misfire, recreating the rattle, recreate, if it's a rain leak, recreate the rain leak. Get a hose on each corner of the car, get somebody to sit in there and look for the offending water as it comes in. Once you've managed to recreate it, the easier you can recreate it, the more often you can recreate the fault, the better it is. If you get a misfire and you can recreate that fault by spraying the coil with water, and every time you do it, it misfires, that's great, because that means that you know you can recreate the misfire. Once you've fixed it, you can try to recreate it again. The misfire doesn't happen, you know you fixed it. So this last part of diagnostics is recreating the fault, what that's been described, fixing it, and then trying the same process of recreating it to know that it's not there anymore. In an ideal world, that always happens, but in the real world, it doesn't. I've had faults that occur once in a blue moon, once a month. I had one particular car that was misfiring literally once, 2, 3, 4 times a year, but when it did, it was terrible. It was undrivable, and they were at their wits' end, and that was a real mare to track down. So there we are. Just to sum up, find a way to recreate the fault, the more the better. Repair the fault and then try to recreate it again. And then you should be some way to being half tidy at diagnostics. Don't forget, another tool that you've got at your disposal is the history of the car. You know, look back at what it's had in the past. Look through its service history. If you've got any invoice history from previous repairs you've done, look at that. If somebody's complaining that they're losing water and the head gasket was replaced 2 weeks ago, you might want to steer them in the direction of whoever fitted the head gasket, or at least look at those areas that have been disturbed. So yeah, history is another good one as well. So I hope this has been helpful. If you've got any tips or comments, leave them downstairs.